So it's been a few years since we've last been here, but the last time we were here, this was all flooded.
And that helps explain the story of the Fledborough Viaduct, of which you may be catching a glimpse to our right.
Seems a bit of a remote place to have a railway.
Yeah, so this railway was known as the East to West. Well, it would have been known as the East to West if it had ever got completed. The idea was to take the valuable coal from the Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire coalfields in one way out onto the western part of Britain to Warrington, at the other end through Lincolnshire and out to the east coast ports. But because of a problem at the nearby Bolsover tunnel, the full railway never got completed, so ending up with a line that basically ran between Chesterfield and Lincoln. Quite a late development railway by many standards. It was opened in 1896, I believe. So I think the most convenient access we've found onto the Fledborough Viaduct is to park in the village of South Clifton, just walk a couple of hundred yards up this lane, and then there's an access point on to the viaduct. Looks like the signposts have seen better days. So we've got the large embankment to our right, and we're hopefully going to sweep round and get onto the old trap bed and then double back on ourselves to find the viaduct. I think we found a way up onto the old trap bed.
So this section on the bridge is fenced off. So you can see over here the iron is rusted away.
So can you see the viaduct starting about 100 yards in front of us, and it's really exciting this because it is a magnificent piece of engineering. So at the start of the first arch of the viaduct, and this type of brick is known as Staffordshire blue. As we walk westwards across the viaduct, we can just see the River Trent in the distance. So there's 59 arches on the viaduct, plus this metal bit that we're walking over now. Now this is a bit that carries us over the River Trent, and this is a later replacement to the original. But on one side of the viaduct there's 20 arches, on the other side there's 39, so 59 arches in all. This part of the viaduct appears popular with artists and also homespun philosophers. So yeah, we said about the reason this line was unsuccessful was the Bolsover tunnel was subject to mining subsidence. But the engineer who designed this viaduct and this part of the line was a man called Elliott Cooper. He's actually very famous in Victorian and Edwardian times. He was president of the Institute of Chartered Engineers, and as well as designing this particular viaduct, he worked for the military in India and in Europe in the First World War. But despite his engineering genius, there was one particular engineering project that beat even the ingenuity of Cooper, and we'll tell you about that in a little while. But I'll give you a clue. A viaduct is one way of traversing a major river, such as the River Trent there. How else do you traverse a major river? So we're now on the western bank of the River Trent, which is the more substantial bit of the viaduct with the 39 arches.
So a lot of people think that many of the railways were closed by Dr. Beeching in the 1960s.
Yes, actually, two of the recent railways were featured on this channel. The Heads of the Valley in Wales and the Abbotsbury Railway in Dorset were actually closed in the 1950s due to being uneconomical at that time, before Beeching got his axe out. And this one too had ceased its useful function by the 1950s. Got a few concrete bits here. Maybe there was an old signal box here, or just a standing signal. So right at the end of the western end of the viaduct, we think we found a path down which will get us a better view from underneath. It's quite steep, so I'm glad we've had quite a dry spell in April this year. Just emerging now into the glory of the Fledborough Viaduct.
Wow, there's an amazing 6 million bricks in this viaduct.
And if you look closely, you can see a pattern. I mentioned the Staffordshire blue earlier, which you can see making the archways and some of the pattern on the main wall. The other type of brick, I think, is called Lincolnshire red. So there you go, not just an amazing piece of engineering to get the viaduct across this horrible marshy land near the River Trent, but decorative too. In fact, the Lincolnshire Chronicle, when the viaduct was opened, talked about its light and graceful appearance and how we can see beauty even in an essentially useful undertaking. So I mentioned the original engineer of this bridge. His first vision was to have these arches rising even higher, and he said it would have rivaled the Forth Bridge up in Scotland for grandeur. So you think about all the effort that went into this, and it ran from 1896 through to the mid-50s, so only really 60 years of active use. I think a little bit further up the line, British Railways use it as a practice line, or Network Rail, or whatever it's called these days, use it as a practice line up there. And then to our left, the line is a cycle track, walkway, however you want to use it, run, all the way into the outskirts of Lincoln. But after its opening, in terms of this viaduct making the press, I think it was mentioned once as far as I could find, and that was a hunt that took place just before the First World War, where the fox ran from Fledborough Church down into the field behind us and towards the viaduct. Apart from that, fortunately, no known disasters took place on this viaduct. So the 55-mile length of line between Lincoln and Chesterfield took just over 4 years to build, at a cost of a little over £2 million. And as well as a transport of goods, it was anticipated that the railway would open up this part of the country to tourists, and with a particular focus being on the Dukeries area of Nottinghamshire. So heading off the viaduct now and enjoying this beautiful spring day along this trail, heading towards the end of the line, or the end of the trail. Do we think this was the post where a signal would come to let trains know it was safe to cross the viaduct?
In this flat Lincolnshire landscape, we've not come across any railway bridges on this route.
No, it's just relentlessly flat. There's no undulations in the land, so there's no roads going over it that had to have bridges built. It's just yard after yard, chain after chain, furlong after furlong. All relentless track, which seems to be very popular with cyclists today. About a mile further up from the viaduct now, towards Chesterfield. We think we might have come to a good siding. Might have to check a map later to see whether we are right.
Something or other. Maybe posts or something, I don't know. Yes, as suspected, we found some evidence of Fledborough signal posts and a goods shed.
Yeah, you can see them clearly marked on this map from the early 1900s. And this is what the area would have looked like around 1966. Yeah, it definitely has a bit of a gravelly, cold tip type feel.
So from where we started at South Clifton, parked just outside the church, we've now covered 2.19 miles.
Well, despite what it said earlier on that viaduct, God must love a trier, because we've come across the remains of a platform.
It was worth the extra walk.
Some quite good nick on both sides actually, this platform.
That's probably because it wasn't in use for very long.
Quite a long platform this, and we found out the name of the station. I think this is a replacement from what I read, it's not the original. But unlike the other day in Dorset, no need to be peeling back loads of foliage in order to find the remains of this station. Goes on quite a way, this platform, might have to pace it out.
I said it'd be 2.3 and 2.3 it is.
Not too bad this bridge either. Is this Staffordshire blue? I think we're getting an expert on late Victorian bricks. Track bed down there as the footpath comes off the trail, because this is where the public part of trail ends. And off the old railway goes in that direction. And the final treat, the old station house here, which I found was up for sale in 1991 in need of renovation. Today they've got drain doctor in. So as promised, I'm now going to pace out the length of the platform at Fledborough Station and see how long it is using a good old traditional method. When I was a kid, this is how we used to pace out a cricket strip actually. 22 paces, 22 yards. Very traditional English method. Right, my estimate is 160 yards. We'll see if we can find some actual factual information. Think I better climb on it as well. Actually, I'm glad I came up because I think I can see a supplementary platform just on the other side. So probably one train here in the sidings, unloading, and the main track bed behind me where Dawn's just climbing up from. We're not going in. Yep, never leave a path unexplored, unless it says specifically not to, because you never know what you're going to find on the other side. And here's a picture of the station in a state of decay from 1978.
So you may remember John posed a question earlier in the video.
That's right, and that was Robert Elliott Cooper, who engineered that wonderful viaduct, was also briefly involved in another scheme that came to nothing. And it was a scheme, I think that was first mooted in the 1870s, and every few decades or so people would organise engineers and contractors to begin surveying work to look at the feasibility of it. And Elliot was actually involved in 1913 in investigating the possibility of this massive potential piece of civil engineering.
So tell us more about what that was.
Well, that was a tunnel under the River Humber, probably about 50 miles away up there.
So was he trying to copy the fact that there was one under the Severn and is it the Mersey?
Yeah, I think that was a general idea. But obviously 1913 was a year before the Great War broke out. He had honorary positions in the British military, and I think he served during the war on matters far more important than tunnelling under the Humber. So in fact, the Humber was never tunnelled in his lifetime. I think he died in about 1942. And in my lifetime, because I grew up in Hull, I can actually remember not a tunnel going under the Humber, but a bridge going over the Humber being opened in 1981, I believe. But more recently, I think in 2020, there is now a tunnel under the Humber that carries pipes from the south to the north, or the north to the south, whichever way you want to look at it. And the return journey over Cooper's wonderful viaduct, crossing the 39 arches on the western side, across the River Trent, and then the 20 arches on the far side. You can see how warm it's got by the fact I'm now in the running vest I wore this morning.
There's a bit of you.
Wonder if we've got some sort of drainage channel here. So we're going to try and come off the railway on the alternative route. So just come down and off the viaduct, which you can see over there behind us, and we think we've just found the remains of a sleeper's hut here. Little bonus, you can see the chimney pot just peeking out of the foliage. That was well worth it, because we can see on this side of the River Trent, the east side, the arches are considerably higher than we saw over on the west side. Holiday let potential, in need of some restoration. So now we leave the railway behind us.
What amazing discoveries we've found today.
And if you would like to join us as we make future discoveries around the country, then please consider subscribing to the channel. It's absolutely free and we're going to be uploading lots of history content in the coming weeks and months.
So join us next time, where every journey begins with a path to the past.